Welcome to the 60 Plus podcast.
I'm Janet.
And I'm Joe. How are you, Janet?
I'm very well, thank you.
Oh, such good grammar you have.
I know I've been practicing.
Have you?
Yes.
Like, do you walk around the house when you're home by yourself and say, I'm well?
Unfortunately, have your
whom am I
voice in
speaking?
my ear going.
I hope it doesn't sound like that.
It kind of does.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Not quite like Snoopy's
Well, this will be the last
teacher.
60 Plus podcast episode, I guess, because I sound like me in Janet's ear.
No, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. But, it's finally sinking in that, I should really use better grammar.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm having a good influence on you.
Yeah.
I'll have you doing Excel spreadsheets before long.
No.
What are we talking about today, Janet?
Well, last week we talked a little bit about the Blue Zone project, right?
Which was great.
Which was really
I
interesting.
really enjoyed learning about it. I knew nothing about it
Yeah.
prior to the
Right.
research we did.
Right. And for those people who didn't listen, it was about what the factors are of people who are living longer and healthier lives around the world in these communities that have these common factors. And one of them was about community and social connection. And so we thought maybe this week we could talk a little bit more about that. And
To that end,
and also we have a special
we
guest.
have a special guest. I thought you were going to say that.
Well, I thought you were going to say that.
All right.
Well, one of us needs to say
All right,
it.
I'm going to say it. We have a special guest.
Oh my goodness. Now you're not really going to talk that way, are you?
No, we do have a special guest.
We do.
She is the executive director of the Newburyport, Massachusetts Senior Center, the head of Council on Aging. Do I have that correct?
Newburyport, yes.
All right.
Mhm.
And
It's Sarah.
it's Sarah.
Hello.
Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for coming in. We would like to talk to Sarah to follow up on last week's episode
Mhm.
where we talked about the Blue Zones.
Right.
And particularly, you run the Senior Community Center in Newburyport. And it's a great source for community and activity. And these are
Mhm.
things that we talked about. The people that live in the Blue Zones have that. That's one of the
Right.
things that helps them live longer.
Right. And in fact, just to put an accent on this, is that I was reading, it's really considered as important as food, water, and shelter is this sense of community. And just to remind everybody, the US Surgeon General declared loneliness and social isolation as an epidemic. And it's interesting because if you look at the data, it actually leads to some very concerning health problems, especially for our age group. Increased risk of cardiovascular disease, depression, anxiety, things of that nature. So, to kind of counterbalance that risk, we want to talk about how do we promote more community in our lives and more social connection. And that's where I think Sarah comes in. She's going to help us talk about that.
Sarah, just why don't you give us a little background about yourself to build up your bona fides around how you know this stuff.
Again, thank you for having me. And I do have quite a bit of experience working in community setting. I started my career as a social worker and then went to work in some long-term care facilities, but ultimately ended up working as a senior center director and recently moved to Newburyport, where I am now the executive director of the Council on Aging there. My community setting and working with aging adults in my experience, I think, leads great into this conversation because obviously for me, I feel it's super important. Community programming is vital to the health of our communities, especially when you look at the demographics in our communities and in Massachusetts and New England, we're really aging. Most of the populations, you've got probably a quarter to a third of the population is over the age of 50. And so it's so important to look at those factors. Community connections is one of the most important things I think that we can control that helps our community stay healthy. So
I said this before we started recording. I think senior centers need a rebranding. let's talk about that for a second, because I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of
A
people
lot of
that kind of have an
misperceptions.
older perception of what a senior center
Yeah.
is like.
Yeah.
Including me, by the way.
Mhm.
Okay.
You know, I was resistant to go in until
Mhm.
I found out how wonderful it was.
Yeah, and you're not alone.
Mhm.
That's very normal for folks to have this image of there's really a lot of negative imagery around growing older.
Mhm.
And I think what you guys are doing here is amazing, because I think it's really bringing a spotlight on all of the stages in our life
Mhm.
can be amazing and filled with fun and activity and love and connectedness. And so senior centers are a great way to bring activity and health related programming and educational programming, but people often do see senior centers as places where people just are sitting around and really just not being active.
Right. Playing
M-
checkers.
Yeah.
More like warehousing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really not what senior centers are about anymore. They really are a hub of activity. And the senior center directors are really working hard to bring that kind of change to people.
Mhm.
And so hopefully people will get that messaging out there through podcasts like this,
Mhm.
that senior centers are changing. They're changing with the demographics, they're changing with the generations. You know, the people who are in the senior centers now are people who were active in the 60s and 70s, and they have their own genre of music and entertainment and interests. And hopefully senior centers are moving to that as well. And
Mhm.
also physically, they're physically more active.
I think longtime listeners of the 60 Plus podcast will know that Janet and I met playing pickleball.
Mhm.
And we met,
Right. It was a program at the senior center.
it was right outside
Yeah.
the senior center a
Mhm.
couple of summers ago. Those kinds of things are what senior centers are about now.
If you're a good senior center, you're really going to be plugged into anyone who's 50 and over.
Right.
It doesn't mean you lose sight of folks who are in their late 90s or 80s. I look at stage, not age.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you guys have heard that terminology. Stage, not age, is kind of where you look at where people are physically and mentally versus where they are age wise.
Right.
And so my philosophy is really programming to all stages,
Okay. Okay.
not people's ages.
Right. Right.
And
That makes a lot of sense.
and so we try to really diversify our activity level programs, such as like our art programs or educational programs, so that you get a large demographic, because 50 to 100 is what we program to, and that's a big span. It's kind of like saying, oh, we're going to do programs for kids who are toddlers to 50.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So
I mean,
you have to
there are a
really.
lot of stages there. There are people playing pickleball and ping
Mhm.
pong
Mhm.
and doing all kinds of physical stuff. And then there are the others that they may be homebound and
Mhm.
require meals on wheels and that kind of thing. So there's a
Right.
big stretch.
Big stretches, or do cheer exercises. We try to meet people where they are. So even activities like how can we adapt? So we have ping pong, but we also have table tennis therapy, which is for folks who
Right.
have a little bit more physically challenged. And so we try to really meet people where they are.
And I think the overarching theme of all this is that it is a place to go to
Mhm.
connect,
Mhm.
right? And there's probably some activity that's going to be appropriate for you that's going to immediately put you in a room full of people that have a common interest
Mhm.
and are at a common stage in their life, and gives you an opportunity to have a conversation and make connections and not stay isolated in your home.
Mhm.
So I think that's the real critical aspect of all of this, and
Mhm.
certainly the common aspect across the country, the world, right? It's like, how do you build that community if you don't naturally have it like these places in the blue zone
Mhm.
do? So I think it's a real important mission for you guys.
hmm Yeah, and like you said, building those friendship networks.
Hmm.
When we're younger and working, you have, your families are around you. You're busy with your kids, and then as your kids get older, you have those connections, right? You're working, you have your working network.
Hmm.
Once you retire, you really kind of start to lose that within 3 to 5 years of retirement. Those connections, unless you work at it,
Right.
and people don't realize it is work to continue to build those relationships and to keep relationships. And so community centers, senior centers, church groups are all great ways to build that common community and to diversify your friendship groups.
Hmm.
And I hear from seniors all the time that I work with, like, I'm so thankful that this senior center is here because when my spouse died or when I became ill or when I, had this issue come up, I had a built in network where
Hmm.
I had my friends. They weren't isolated at home. You can easily get isolated very quickly
Hmm.
after you retire if you don't work at it.
We have talked about this,
Right.
about how people don't think about that when they retire. They're just looking forward to, golfing and traveling.
Right. And
But,
and can I, right,
Mhm.
financially? We even had somebody talk about the financial aspects of retirement. Even he said the first thing you have to decide is,
Mhm.
are you emotionally prepared? Because there's going to be so many changes in your life, just, stepping out of that, to your point, that your job network, that whole structure, if you will, around your day
hmm
and your social connections.
One of the notes that I made that I wanted to make sure we talked about was single seniors.
hmm
That's something someone could be newly single,
hmm
either because of the death of a spouse or divorce or whatever. They may kind of isolate themselves. They may kind of just not feel like they want to go out and expand. But a senior center is a great place to do that because there are other people like them
hmm
there. It's a great place to meet people with similar interests. When we talking about playlists and music and
hmm
different, yeah,
Yep.
it's
hmm
like-minded people congregating, getting together. They could play cards, they could play pickleball, they could,
hmm
I don't know if you do excursions out beyond
Yeah.
the four walls of the center.
We do, and we have clubs too. So we do trips, but we have a lot of clubs that meet at the center. We have a group that loves to get together and work on their stamps. Right, they're
Hmm.
stamp collectors. We have a model shipbuilding club, and so a lot of times we will find people that have some passion, and then say, and that they usually will approach us and say, would love to be able to get a group together. So we advertise, and then who knows? Next thing you know, there's a whole bunch of people that come out of the woodwork that have these common interests.
Hmm.
And that's how, like, even the cribbage group or mahjong, which is a tile game, you've got, we have a bridge group. So there's all of those people that formed these connections. Again, same thing as whether it be an activity like the Zumba or line dancing or Tai Chi or ballet or tap. So those
Hmm.
people have those physical abilities to get together and connect
Hmm.
and have that like interest.
A few weeks ago, we did talk about the benefits of dance
Right.
with, was it Sue?
Sue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. You mentioned trips.
hmm
We recently talked about solo travel. Some people still, they don't feel great or confident enough to go out and travel on their own, but
hmm
you organize trips.
We do.
Do you ever get to go on the trips?
I have in the past.
Are there other avenues to try to promote this community, if you will?
Maybe people that aren't in the United States can leave a comment in the Spotify
Yeah,
comments
I'd
section
really be curious to know.
as to how they go about things
Right.
like
I mean,
this.
I think culturally, like you might have the local pub, where people meet
hmm
at 5 o'clock. And I mean, in fact, they talked about that in the Blue Zone project, right? In
1 to
Sardinia,
2
how
glasses of red wine. We
but
love
they
that.
meet at the end of the day and they have
hmm
a place to meet, whether
Mhm.
that's church or the pub or
hmm
or something of that. So, I think for our listeners, if you do have a senior center or community center, it's certainly worth contacting them and trying to understand what the offerings are and see if there's something there for you,
hmm
because we may not all be equivalent in terms of our funding or friends
Sure.
support.
the benefits that people experience
Mhm.
as a result of senior centers. What are the
Mhm.
top benefits?
Yeah, so definitely, I would say mental, decreased depression, decreased loneliness and isolation, decreased anxiety. So I think that is what as the top benefit. Secondly, improve physical fitness. Just because you have your physical programs, but you also have nutritional programs. People who are isolated tend to have less healthy diets. And so when people come into community centers or senior centers, a lot of the senior centers offer meals programs. We have a veg out market, but a lot of them offer something like that, a food pantry.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the local other senior centers in our area have food pantries in them. Definitely nutritional, and all that will help, your dental health as well. And having access to foot clinics, blood pressure clinics, flu shot clinics. So being part of it will help prolong and help your physical as well. So I think that's the second thing that I see. So definitely top positive mental changes in people who attend senior community centers, and then physical definitely would be my next thing that I see people
Mm-hmm.
as I see them coming more. Those are the two that I see coming up, getting
Right.
better. I have an example. I had to work when this was my last senior center. I was working with a woman who had, her and her husband, even though she had her husband, she felt very lonely, and she started coming. She told me, she said, I was really lonely. Feel like I have a group of friends. And so she said, I don't know where to start. And so I'm like, well, what are your interests? So we were talking. She's like, well, I like to be active. So I said, okay, let's get you connected with one of the physical fitness classes, which she did. And she started making friendships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she was so excited. And she would come and she's like, just having so much fun. But then COVID hit
Mm.
and she was so lonely. And we started doing Zoom programs, but she didn't know how to use the computer. So we had to like walk her through it. Um, but we finally got her there. And she said, I don't know what I would have done mentally
Right.
without those connections. So
Right.
I can see it tangibly. I can see it on people, and in that they'll tell me. So
Right.
it's cool.
Yeah, I
It's kinda
know you
cool.
must have so many
A
stories.
lot.
Yeah.
I think for some people, as they get older, it's harder to make friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I know where I lived for a long time, where we raised our family, the friends that we had in the neighborhood, a lot of them would downsize and they'd move out, and younger families would move in. And I felt like I had fewer neighbors that I interacted with. And I think the longer you stay, the more that happens, and isolation becomes kind of inertia.
Mm-hmm.
So people get to make friends,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fantastic. What about the people that are reluctant to go into the senior center? How
Mm-hmm.
do you, like, I don't know.
Promote it. How do you
Mm-hmm.
promote it
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and let them be aware of it? Yeah.
So in our community, we're lucky. We have an outreach worker, and she does on-site visits to local senior housings, which is great.
Okay.
This fall, she's going to be starting some visits in on-site once a month at the local library.
Mm-hmm.
In other communities, I think, the goal is hopefully your community is doing some of that education. But I think empowering members of our community to also be kind of like outreach workers, right? I've
Mm-hmm.
always got flyers and like, tell people about it, listen to podcasts, make sure you're connecting with local churches. Again, we're lucky in Newburyport because we have an outreach worker, but I've got a Facebook page. I haven't started Instagram yet, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll likely be getting an Instagram soon. But we do have a Facebook page. We have a website. So we try to get all that information out on those mediums. And then in our newsletter, in the newspaper, just trying to make sure people understand what the community center is all about. And again, that it's not people just sitting around drinking coffee, playing bingo, although we do play
There is
bingo.
some of
We
that.
do play bingo and we do drink coffee, right? But there's so much more.
Right.
My joke is it's not your grandmother's senior center, right? So we have in our mind that kind of dark room, big room where they would, people would kind of congregate. Senior centers are bright, active, fun, engaging places where there's learning and laughter and connection.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's like what we were talking about with the blue zones, so important for healthy, successful aging.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, they were saying it's probably the number one factor. Of course, you have to eat and drink and all that's good stuff, but that
You
was
don't have to drink, Janet.
water, Joe,
Oh,
water.
okay. All right.
But yeah, I mean, he's can't, he's definitely a proponent of,
You're
have
talking
to
Dan
connect.
Buettner now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So if someone that's listening that's never been to their senior or their community center, how could they find out if there is one, and what should they do? Should they call ahead to make an appointment generally, or just show up, or?
Most senior centers welcome people. You don't need an appointment to go to a
Mhm.
senior center. But I think if it makes somebody more comfortable knowing that they have an appointment, because it's really getting in that door, that
Right.
that first step that's hard. So sometimes an appointment, if that's how you are, like if you're just, "Oh, I don't want to just show up," make an appointment. You're the director or the activities coordinator or the outreach worker, if there is one in the community center, senior center, then definitely make connections. And you can do that by making a phone call. Usually the information is found if you have access to your city's website,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where our information is located. It's right embedded on the city's webpage. A Google search might help if you're web savvy. And if you're not, maybe a family member could help find that information out. Or asking a neighbor or a friend that you may have. So if you have a neighbor or a friend that you trust, maybe they'll go with you for that first visit.
Mhm.
Or you could probably call the town itself too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, the
Nice.
town clerk's office usually has that information. So yeah.
Mhm.
And in some places in the country, it might be county based, so you might want to check with the county as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This has been great, Sarah. It's wonderful to have you come in and talk about senior centers, and specifically in Massachusetts, but across the country. And if you're not from Massachusetts, leave a comment in the new comment section on the Spotify page, and tell us how you interact with a community or a senior center, or if you're
Yeah,
international.
what is it that how do you connect
Sure.
in your community? Yeah.
Sure. So thanks again, Sarah.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
we
for
really
having me.
appreciate you
Really.
being here and talking with us today.
Janet, we have some exciting news.
We do?
Yes. So coming soon, coming very, very soon, is our new website.
Oh,
So just stay
that
tuned
is
for that.
exciting.
Stay tuned for that. We'll announce it when it goes live.
Right.
But
And
but
that's
Sophia's been working on it.
yes, and it's coinciding with our 1 year.
It might be a little
Anniversary,
little
right?
bit after that. But
Wait, is it this week or next week?
This is our 52nd episode, so this is technically our 1 year
Oh, is
anniversary,
it?
right? Yeah, today.
Oh, wait, happy anniversary to us. Woohoo!
So yeah, this is episode 52. So watch for that exciting news about our new website. And also, I mentioned a couple of times, there's a new comments section on the Spotify 60 Plus page.
Yeah.
So check out the comments section. Leave us a comment.
Yep.
I don't have
Love-
anything else.
Love to hear from you.
Do you have anything, Janet?
I do not.
All right. So until next week, this has been the 60 Plus podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Janet. Bye.